I expect my elected officials to be accountable and transparent. About myself, I'm a 51-year-old proud grandma of 4 beautiful children, very beautiful and intelligent children, I must say. I graduated from the University of Minnesota. My degree's in economics, actually. I worked in the health insurance field, in life insurance and financial planning for 10 years. I did go back to school for a technical degree in architectural drafting and estimating. This put me into the engineering field, which was what I was intending, and instead of drawing, I ended up going down the road of document control, which sounds a little strange, but it's controlling the proprietary drawings and making sure they're available and everybody's building off the right things, but it put me into procurement, it put me into working with all the vendors, the subcontractors and everything. Just a lot of information. Township. That's better. Thank you. It's my job to ensure that each and every vote is counted accurately, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that that does happen. I took an oath to faithfully uphold the duties of this position and to follow the state statutes to the best of my ability, and I have done that. Despite the slander from Secretary Benson, I want you to know that I've done nothing wrong. I've only asked the questions that other clerks should also be asking and who now are asking. Our positions as local clerks are essential for assuring accurate and fair elections. And if we're intimidated and silenced from doing our jobs, you, the people, become the victims. To provide the transparency needed in Adams Township, I've enlisted the assistance of experts and attorneys. And today you'll learn more about my work as Adams Township Clerk from attorney Stephanie Lambert. Stephanie Lambert has previously worked as a prosecutor for 12 years and handles state and federal matters as well as election causes. I look forward to continuing to serve you as clerk, and rather than keep you here all day Saturday, I provided forms that you can ask any questions that you may have. I will respond with a written answer to provide that transparency for the township. Please include your address and email address. Place the completed forms on the table in the back, and I'll respond to each one of you. Thank you again for your support, and at this time I'm going to request Attorney Stephanie Lambert to provide you the additional information about my work and as well as about the law. Thank you.
On November 3rd, 2020, Clerk Stephanie Scott was elected by the people of Adams Township to serve as your clerk. Stephanie Scott has a unique background in data, engineering, and management that allowed her to dig deep immediately upon becoming elected as your clerk to learn about the election system, the appropriate contracts that come into play, the laws and the rules to ensure that accurate elections take place here in Adams Township. In the process of reviewing the election process, Stephanie learned intimately what the election system consisted of, what the vendor's role was in the election, what her duties as the clerk were, what the Secretary of State's role was, and how the election system operated. During this process, she discovered a number of problems that she began to address to fix for the township of Adams Township. Additionally, she discovered law violations committed by Secretary of State Benson and inaccurate voter rolls. A voter roll is simply a list of people that are qualified to vote in a particular jurisdiction or city. Clerk Scott began to bring this to the Secretary of State's attention, along with the voter roll problems, and at that point, the Secretary of State began a witch hunt on Clerk Scott. I want you to know we're going to go into detail here to provide the information to you. Clerk Scott is going to answer any questions that you have after this presentation if you fill out the form. She'll provide an answer to you in writing so that you can learn exactly how the elections work in Adams Township and have full transparency. Okay. What's that? I don't think that's the beginning of the first slide. It is. Yeah, I don't know why it's not.
Can you get to the first slide, please? I don't think that's it. Is it really?
I apologize. The slides are moved around a little bit. That's okay. The first thing Stephanie started looking at was the qualified voter roll. The Secretary of State caught Clerk Scott's attention when she sent out a number of different emails from the Bureau of Elections instructing the local clerks to delete election data in violation of federal and state law. Clerk Scott found this highly suspicious because federal law states that you shall maintain it for 22 months. So why would we ever want to delete a piece of the election system that must be reconciled later if there's to be a problem? So Stephanie Scott did not violate federal law. In fact, she kept her EPP stick that we're going to later learn about. Just prior to the 2020 election, Secretary Benson sent out this newsletter informing all clerks that she was going to inflate the voter roll in the state of Michigan by approximately 700,000. And she wanted them to know that there was not going to be a paper trail that they would see in their local office to reconcile this. She stated in this newsletter that this was going to happen at the state level through the driver motor system, and that they would not get paper to reflect this. She said that they would see the voter roll change between the dates of October and November 3rd election. Upon taking office in December of 2020, Stephanie began to learn how the voter roll would be accessed. She found it to be a major security concern that the voter roll could be placed on the clerk's phones. So there was multiple different ways to access the voter roll, but that was one of the most alarming things that she found out right away after the election. I'm sorry, I just need to follow along here, so just give me 1 second. It was open. Here we go. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Stephanie Scott began looking at the voter roll after she took office, and she found that there were numerous duplicate entries in the voter roll, which should never happen. This could allow for a person to receive more than one mail-in ballot, which we heard about after the 2020 election, and it could also allow for fraud to take place in an election. At that point, she notified both the state and the county of these duplicate voter roll entries. She received an email that you're going to see here on September 1st, 2021 from the deputy clerk at the county, indicating that she's not the only one finding this problem. There's other jurisdictions that have multiple duplicate voter roll registrations that have been discovered, and they've reached out to the state. And the state gave its standard response that it's human error and it must be rare. On September 27th, 21, Stephanie Scott started providing examples both to the county and the state about the Adams Township duplicate voter registration. She gave specific names and pointed out how the system should never allow for the same person to be registered twice. On October 11th, 2021, Stephanie Scott provided an attachment showing each and every person that had a duplicate registration in Adams Township. Her concern was this was going on throughout the state. On September 29th, 21, she received an email from the county clerk acknowledging that he knew that there were duplicate registrations in the voter registration or the qualified voter roll or qualified voter file. You're going to hear the term QVF and QVR. He states to her, "I'm currently waiting for a response from the state after reaching out to both Representative Fink and Shirkey. Our own attempts to get a satisfactory answer from the Bureau on our questions have come up empty thus far. The state is refusing to answer after she notified everyone just prior to the 2020 election that she was inflating the voter roll by 700,000 as to what is going on with these duplicate entries." On October 11th, 2021, there was an email that took place from Stephanie Scott to the county clerk's office. She's asking for an update, and she wants to know what to do with the AV ballot applications. She's concerned that clerks across the state will use that list and just simply mail out mail-in ballots and not discover that there's duplicates. She's stating that there's a 1.2% duplication rate in Adams Township. She's communicating by text message with the clerk, reminding him that he sent an email, that she sent an email to him giving the exact details of who's got the duplicate ballots. And here's an email on October 11th, 2021 to the Secretary of State, again bringing to her attention the duplicate voter registration entries. She states, I'm raising to your attention two issues I'm currently experiencing with the QVF database. One, the database query for the November 2nd election has changed 3 times since printing the AV applications. The quantity of voters on this list has gone down. 2, the inbox requesting the AV ballots now has 5 people that were already on the AV list. This constitutes a 1.2% duplication rate for the township's AV list. Please advise as to what's being done to remedy the situation. So your local clerk is trying to maintain an accurate voter roll to prevent fraud in your elections, and she's again not receiving any answer from the Secretary of State. Very confusing to Ms. Scott was that on February 12th, 2021, in December of 2020, and on other occasions, the Secretary of State's office repeatedly sent memorandums and letters instructing her to destroy data in violation of state and federal law. Specifically, the Secretary of State says, the e-poll book laptops and flash drives, the EPB software associated with the files must be deleted unless a post-election audit is planned and that has not been completed, or the deletion of the data has been stayed by a court order. The Secretary of State legally has no authority to order the destruction of evidence in violation of federal law. She has absolutely no authority to do this, and this is a conspiracy within her office to order this with the local clerk's office. She later states that there's no original election data on these EPB sticks, which is absolutely false, as her justification for doing this. Michigan Law 168520 gives a local township clerk a lot of power, and that is why Stephanie Scott and all local clerks in this audience are so important, not only in past elections but upcoming elections, because they would have, as the Secretary of State knows, standing to assert a objection to certification should there be problems, or file appropriate lawsuits against the Secretary of State or vendors. This code allows a township clerk that she's authorized and empowered to appoint assistant examiners for the purpose of investigation should she believe that there's illegal or fraudulent registrations in a township or city, in any ward or precinct. Stephanie Scott has expert reports that will be shared throughout this presentation from Ben Cotton that has very important information related to this that she investigated on behalf of Adams Township. Michigan State Law 41.65 states that Stephanie Scott and all local township clerks are the person that shall have custody of all records, books, and papers of the township. It's her job, not the Secretary of State's, to maintain the records of Adams Township. Ben Cotton in February of 22 and in July of 22 drafted affidavits to provide for Adams Township to provide transparency as to what's going on with the elections. These affidavits are very important and reveal that the Secretary of State's office has provided inconsistent or false statements to Adams Township. Specifically, Ben Cotton, this is very alarming, notes that the qualified voter roll that Stephanie Scott has been flagging has duplicate entries is installed on the tabulators. He states that you can see live with an internet connection who's voting, how they're voting, and an electronic file could be swapped out going undetected. Okay, this is unacceptable. This is not the safest and securest election in history. He goes on to talk about how The EPB data that the Bureau of Elections states has no original data on it, and the poll book that it hooks into is printed to preserve the data. That's false. Jonathan Brader issued an email to Stephanie Scott and to others stating that the poll book that has the EPB stick that goes into it with the voter roll on it has no original data on it, and that they print out at the end of the election 3 documents that would preserve the data. Ben Cotton in his affidavit talks about how that's false. Deleting the EPB stick deletes same-day voter information that is not stored anywhere else. So this is starting to explain the conspiracy to Clerk Scott as to why it's so important when you inflate a voter roll by 700,000 to delete the EPB data. She continued to dig and learn on behalf of Adams Township. She reviews the Hart contract on page 60. Let me pull that. It states, let me back up. Hart is your election vendor in Adams Township. There's 3 election vendors approved for Michigan: Dominion, Hart, and ES&S. They're all essentially, in my opinion, a monopoly because they've sued each other for intellectual property. There's documentation showing joint ownership at times. I've been told by experts that essentially under the hood, they're all the same machine. On page 60 in the Hart contract, it states that Stephanie Scott, on behalf of Adams Township, is responsible for all data and backups for preserving the election data on the election equipment, not Hart. They have a hold harmless clause in their contract saying Hart's not going to be responsible if you don't back up the data. So Stephanie learns that that is her job to do. So she's being instructed by the vendor that she's utilizing that they're not responsible, that she's responsible, and she's also being instructed by the Secretary of State to delete the data, and she's being given false information that there's no data on these EPB sticks, that she should delete them. Stephanie reviewed U.S. Code 20701 and 20702 and learned that it was absolutely her responsibility to maintain these election records for 22 months. She received yet another letter in August of 22 directing that the EPB software be deleted. She continued to look at data from the state, and she discovered, after she had the EPB data analyzed by Ben Cotton, that her data at the local level that matches the county level, when you have an election, the data reports up. So the township reports to the county, which reports to the state. The state data differed from the county data by 11.5% in Adams Township. Hypothetically, if you were to extrapolate that to the state of Michigan, if the state of Michigan differed by 11.5%, that would be 800,000 unique voters that are off, which is obviously a ton when an election, say for 2020, has a small margin of difference of 100,000. So she's finding here that the county canvass was 1,362 votes, which differed from the state number by over 70. In February 23 of 2021, she received another email from Abe Dane instructing her to uninstall the EPB software and remove the data according to the Bureau of Elections. She reviewed the 2020 records, the voting records, and she found that the state official data that they stated they reported for the election in Michigan was 1,362, which differed from the Adams Township data of 1,332. There were 79 unique voter entries. She continued to review records to make sure that they were accurate in Adams Township, and she thought it would be interesting to look at Representative Andrew Fink's voting history. She found that he did not register according to the state until after the 2020 election, yet has been voting in Adams Township since 2009. All of this information was brought to the attention of the county and to the state. By this time, in October 25th of 2021, the witch hunt was fully on. Clerk Scott started receiving aggressive emails from the state regarding the upcoming election as she continued to ask questions. She was directed to do things such as perform preventative maintenance that was not required pursuant to the contract on the election machines. She raised concerns that this could delete data that she was required to preserve by federal law from the 2020 election. She was told falsely by Jonathan Brader from the Secretary of State's office that there is no data stored and it would not delete anything by performing logic and accuracy testing and preventative maintenance. Ben Cotton's report shows that this is false, that you absolutely can delete data. Data is stored on the machines, as well as the Hart contract states the same, that she's responsible for maintaining the data. Clerk Scott proposed a reasonable solution, which was to use a different machine for the upcoming election so that she could preserve the data on her machine that she had in her possession. She's required as clerk to keep this machine under lock and key, which she has done. At that point, she was told no, she must provide this machine for logic and accuracy testing. She raised concerns about the logic and accuracy testing that she learned about. She said, your plan does not provide for all of the races to be tested in the logic and accuracy testing. And she reviewed the law. MCL 168798 states that you must test all and accurately count for all votes for all races and offices. She received an email when she questioned this from Jonathan Brader from Secretary Benson's office on October 15th, 2021. He says, you seem to be mistakenly assume that a test deck must include every single possible combination of votes on the ballot, which is exactly what the law says it needs to do. So they go back and forth arguing about this because, again, Clerk Scott wants to follow the law. Ben Cotton's report shows that the state did not follow the law, that you do need to test each and every race, why it's important, and that data is preserved on that machine, and that there was 11.5% difference from the state data to the county data and the township data. In Michigan, we have decentralized elections versus centralized. Some states have one person in charge of the entire state's elections, such as the Secretary of State. Here in Michigan, the Constitution and law gives all of the authority to the township clerks and the city clerks. They are the ones that are tasked to run the elections, make sure that they're fair and accurate, and report results to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is merely to give guidance to each of these offices, but they are the ones that have the duty to run the fair and accurate election. And we're seeing here exactly why that's so important. Can you imagine in 2024 if there's any fraud and we've created a situation where all of the local clerks are intimidated to address these issues with the Secretary of State? This is their job, to show what problems exist and fix them on behalf of their townships and cities. There's other election concerns that Clerk Scott has researched that she wants you to know about. So it's not a conspiracy theory. We do not have the most safe and secure election process in place in this country. In Williamston, Tennessee, the clerk there was a hero as well. She spotted during an election that the results did not match that she was monitoring throughout the day, the machine results. So at the end of the day, she did a hand count of her ballots that was different than what the machine said. So she shoved them back through the machine. The machine gave the total that it gave the first time. So she did another hand count. Her hand counts matched, but were different than the machine count. So she called in the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, the federal arm of elections. And They could not figure out what the problem was. They came in, looked at her equipment, ran the ballots themselves. They had to call Dominion in and ask Dominion what was wrong. Dominion had to disclose that its source code was bad and that it was going to deliver a patch. So these tabulators have a name that makes you believe that it's just a counting device. It's not. It's a computer system. It's a computer system that experts talk about can be hacked. It can never fully be secured. It has source code, and it can be manipulated. So Clerk Scott is doing a very good job on behalf of Adams Township, making sure that each and every part of your election process runs according to the law and is fair and accurate. She's also making sure that the vendors don't have exclusive control. The Constitution in Michigan gives her control over your elections. We cannot have a situation where a vendor, a third party that you do not elect, is now dictating and controlling and not providing a transparent process to Adams Township. That's what the Secretary of State's office wants. The Secretary of State answered something called interrogatories in the Antrim County case. In that case, they disclosed when they were asked how a tabulator works, they said if you want details, we have a general working knowledge, you need to ask the manufacturer. That's significant because that means only the manufacturer, the vendor, knows how the tabulator works when a clerk needs to run the election. So they don't want the local clerks to look at the elections. If you question the elections, they send the state police to seize the tabulators. Right now, the Adams Township tabulator is in the possession of the Michigan State Police. Stephanie Scott started raising questions. She never did anything inappropriate. She never violated any laws. In fact, one time she arrived in October when she was sending these emails, and she found that her office was unlocked. So she took her tabulator and she gave it an extra level of security, and she locked it in her filing cabinet. So there would have to be 2 locks to go through to be able to get to that tabulator. The Secretary of State used inappropriately the Michigan State Police to remove records and papers from the Adams Township Clerk's office that Stephanie Scott is required to maintain for you and follow the law. In addition to Williamston, Tennessee, other jurisdictions started looking at their elections and local clerks started to seek the help of experts. In Georgia, 69 counties found the same problem that they found in Williamston, Tennessee. So while this is not Georgia or Tennessee, I don't want you to be distracted with that. I want you to know these are the reasons it's so important to have a local clerk looking at your election. In Fulton County, Pennsylvania, they did an analysis and they found that the Dominion system was communicating with Canada and had a malicious Python script installed on it. So, and that was for the 2020 election. So these are the reasons it's so important to have someone at the local level stand up and say, stop, I'm not going to be intimidated. We need to follow the rules and the law, and I need to have a transparent process to provide to my community so that they know that their elections are run fair and accurately. After her tabulator was seized, the Secretary of State's office locked Stephanie out of the online qualified voter roll. So when she was raising issues on behalf of Adams Township regarding the inaccuracies and the duplicates, she no longer has access to that from the Secretary of State to tell you if that problem has been fixed. This is a slide that shows what was taken from Adams Township by the Michigan State Police. The tabulator was taken. The ballots, the county came in and moved to the county office from the 2020 election, and the e-poll book with the EPB stick. All of the evidence that Stephanie Scott is to maintain for your township. This is an explanation of what each of those are. The laptop is is called the e-poll book, it has the voter roll on it, and the EPB stick is downloaded at the end of the night. And this is what the Secretary of State had requested be deleted, or actually ordered should be deleted, that has original election evidence on it. So with that, Stephanie wants you to know that this is not a partisan issue. This is not a Democrat issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is an issue about each vote in this county being counted accurately as it's supposed to, and maintaining the election systems in a way that are transparent and accurate that prevent fraud from occurring. So I believe that Stephanie has another clerk that would like to provide a little information about what she has learned about Adams Township in the state. Okay, all right. So, where is she?
Yeah, it's not from the clerk.
Okay, is she coming?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You want to come up and read that?
Stephanie, can you give her your mic?
Oh,
Yes. All right.
So I'm just going to read a letter from one of our friends that wanted me to share some of her stuff about Stephanie.
Question, we didn't hear your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Betsy
Okay.
Tappenden.
Say that again?
Betsy Tappenden,
And you're from?
Branch County.
Thank you very much.
My name is Mrs. William Weiler. I live in Montcalm County, which also uses Hart InterCivic voting machines. Everything you will hear today about the machines, or heard today, applies to every other county that uses them. It was 16 months ago that I was watching my township meeting on YouTube. One of their suggested videos happened to be November Township meeting in Adams Township. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you watch it. Your township clerk, Stephanie Scott, was documenting why she had a problem with the logic and accuracy testing of the township tabulator. She brought that concern and her information to the township people and the board. I was less than halfway through the video when I paused it, looked up Adams Township, and called the number for the clerk. I wanted to tell her what an awesome job her presentation she had done and how important I believed it was to have clerks stand up for these problems. I also told her that I believed she did the right thing by not having her machine maintained before the 22 months was up. I have spent a lot of time watching Stephanie do her job for you since then. When you are going to see, or what you saw today has been taking place for months, more than a year, that she's been accumulating the information and compiling it and putting it into intelligible format to share. She works a full-time job, does as much of her job as she is allowed to do, and she stepped up to help with the treasurer's job when it was needed. I have no ability to comprehend why anyone would think that she needed to be recalled. Your township couldn't get a better clerk if you tried. She has used her own time, her own resources, and her own skills to put this all together for you today. She has stood up for the state government that would have deleted all of your 2020 information if they had their way. As it is, the county took your ballots out of your township, and you have no way of knowing if you'll ever get your originals back. She has been disrespected, lied about in the news, and she has been attacked verbally in meetings, all for doing her job to the best of her ability. She has had almost no support in the township. Those few of you that have stood up with her and for her have my gratitude for protecting your section of America. What she has done and will be doing is going to make a difference for the entire state and affect the nation in its decision to properly count our ballots in a verifiable manner in the future. That is my belief. You should be very proud of her. I wish she was my township clerk. Please give her your attention. And actually, so give your attention to the presentation. You are not wasting your time, and I wish I could have been there.
At this time, Patrick Byrd would like to speak to the audience for a few minutes about issues that he's learned about nationally. He's not intimately involved in the Adams Township matter with Stephanie Scott, but he's aware that there are issues throughout the country, and he wanted to say a few words. Patrick is the, okay, he's right there. Okay. Hi, Patrick. I can't see you. Patrick. Patrick, I just wanted to start by letting you know that Stephanie Scott invited her township here today so that they could learn about the problems in Anna's township that she wanted to fix. And she mailed out invitations. And I have a stack here that were returned. And she used the address from the latest qualified voter roll from the Secretary of State. So these are the people that couldn't be with us today because the Secretary of State maintains inaccurate records.
That's funny, isn't it?
I don't know. It's a stack about 1.5 inches, and this is a tiny little township. And a lot of these have a note on here saying.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you. Can I lead the audience in giving Stephanie a hand? Listen, Stephanie is one of my favorite people. Stephanie is, she is at the tip of the spear of these issues of election fraud. And Stephanie wanted me to come and talk to you about big picture. Now, I'm sorry. I was supposed to get up there last night at midnight and then drive in at 2 in the morning. And I know sometimes I just fade. And I just faded and thought that's one last trip I can't make. I've been overseas for 2 months. I'm very sorry I did not make it to meet with you in person. But I did want to tie what's going on with you into a bigger picture. Does the world seem kind of confusing to you folks these days? If you'd like to know, let me explain the big picture. And unfortunately, as odd as this may sound, just remember that it's going to take something odd to explain the situation we're in. I've come public, and it's been, put it this way. I spent 1983-84 in China studying not just Chinese, but Chinese philosophy, including Maoism. I know quite a bit about how this works. And there's 3 readings I will direct you to, and I'll send these to Stephanie right after this. One is called The Secret Speech of Minister Cher Haotian, and he says in 2003, a speech which the Chinese have never denied, it was the highest level leap that ever came out in Chinese history. And there's his speech as well as a book in 1998 by 2 Chinese colonels called Unrestricted Warfare, as well as another called 100-Year Marathon. Yes, thank you, the 100-Year Marathon. These 3 books. And what they paint is this. They tell the following story. That in 1949, when the communists came to power, they set out on a 100-year marathon, at the end of which they want to reestablish themselves as the Central Kingdom. That's what China means, the Central Kingdom. And the rest of the world is organized in this Confucian style of concentric rings. And that's and we have turned into a vassal state. We're turned into like a bootlick state. Well, that was the plan, 2049, and in 2010, they moved the date up ahead to 2030. I can tell you now, they now think the date is 2028, maybe 2027. And this is what they have in mind. And I'll be going through this in a second. You can put this, yeah, thanks. I'll be getting to the org structure in a moment. This is what they have in mind. And it's right in that speech. So if this sounds wacky, please just go look at the things I've just put in front of you. This is their stuff. First of all, there's like 6 different levels of warfare to them, and only the 6th is what we would think of as warfare, with bullets flying. The rest is economic and financial competition and diplomatic competition, and going after your enemy's most important diplomatic relationships and severing them, like we're seeing this week, things like this. And only the 6th is war as we know it. And their aim is, they already have in China, every nice home in America already has a deed distributed for it in China. Your homes, no kidding, there's some Chinese communist guy who already has a deed to your home. He sees that you put in a swimming pool last summer on Google Earth. He thanks you for it. His belief is that by 2028, he's occupying that home. And as whack job as this sounds, please just go read these things from their national security community. And how it is to come about is, as retiring Minister Cherhoukian said, was in 2003, he said it's going to start with the use of a bioweapon. We're going to destabilize American society with some bioweapon. And we're then just going to keep on cranking up the pressures in different ways until ultimately we collapse into civil war. And within civil war, 90% of us die from supply chain collapse. This has already all been modeled out, and that's in another book, a novel called 1 Second After. That novel was actually written as to capture the learnings of a national security community exercise in 2005 about what would happen if the U.S. got hit with bioweapons or financial collapse or an EMP. So what we're being walked through is you're living through World War III, but in the Chinese mentality, we have this crude barbarian understanding of war. The greatest victory is a victory where you don't have to even fight, in their view. So they're coming for us. Now let's go quickly. I see the producer, who's a tough one, wants me to walk through these a few slides. Can you put the org chart up, please? Yeah, so China is basically, think of it as the chairman of the board of who we're up against. The CEO is Iran. The president is Cuba. Cuba's very sophisticated. Don't let their military is silly. They train with sticks and stuff, but their intelligence services are extremely sophisticated. Leninist. The senior vice president of this thing that we're up against, and this is what people don't understand. It's a cartel you never hear about, Cartel de los Soles. That's Venezuelan, and these soles, the stars, or the sun, it's the cartel of the suns. The suns referred to are the stars on the shoulders of the capos of this particular mafia, because this particular mafia is a nation called Venezuela. Venezuela is where mafia and cartel turns into nation state. And this senior vice president, speaking metaphorically, this senior vice president, so to speak, has, next slide, has 4 vice presidents. These are the Gulf cartels. These are the Mexican cartels that you hear about. There's 4 of them, and every square inch of our border is controlled by one of these cartels. Some are old school and could be old school gangsters and could be dealt with in one way, but some of them are straight up like Zetas, or they started off as the hitmen for the Gulf. Anyway, so it is in fact the truth that this election stuff ultimately has its architecture and its trace histories in Venezuela. And the whole story of this has been a wonderful investigation for several years. It will be coming out eventually. But this actually was built to keep Hugo Chavez in power. 3 Venezuelan men moved to the U.S. and started the company. And it's a Delaware company, but it was 3 guys from Venezuela who had worked this deal out in Venezuela. And this really is their basic software and package called Smartmatic is the architecture of the major systems in use. There's 3 systems, and just like whether you buy a laptop that is Lenovo or HP or Dell, whichever one you buy on the inside, you're getting Microsoft Windows operating system. Similarly, whether people buy Dominion or ESS or Hard, what they're getting on the inside has historically been this package from Smartmatic. Now, Dominion says that in 2018 they rewrote some of the software, but they're not going to let anybody see. And Dominion also assembles its machines, incidentally, in Taiwan, in a factory in Taiwan, but the motherboard comes from communist China. So just so you know, if you know anything about computers, the motherboard, that's like the frontal lobe of the computer. The frontal lobe of the computer comes from China, and the software ultimately has its roots in Venezuela. So this is how they've come for us. And I'm giving you this little history lesson. And I wish I could tell you more about myself that you might understand. This actually is, I was the CEO of Overstock, but that was almost a cover job. I'm being a little metaphoric here, but this has really been my life. This stuff has been my life. I know what I'm talking about. You're at the front tip of a war to take down the USA. What they're walking us through. Liz, is this getting too far afield, or is this what you guys expect?
Well, Patrick, I was just talking with Stephanie, and
Can I interact with Stephanie?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Patrick? Hello? Can you hear? I was just talking with Stephanie Scott here, the Adams Township Clerk, and she thought, well, you know, all of this is so technical that you've discovered at a much national and international level. And what she is speaking to here is exclusively just Adams Township. But what you're talking about, I can see how it connects. We've talked a lot about how Secretary Benson was on the Truman National Security Board along with Hunter Biden for the 2020 election. So I think what you're trying to do is explain how, you know, in your research, you believe there's a international, the national, down to the local township level, which is, I think, essentially what Stephanie is saying, that she needed to learn about these election systems, what's on them, are there China parts on the motherboard, what problems could exist for Adams Township, and that's what she's done. So I don't know if you heard, but
Stephanie, stand in front of the camera. There you go, perfecto.
Can you hear me now?
yes.
I'm sorry, I wasn't making the connection. That's where this all leads to. You guys are on the front there in Adams Township. You're on the Normandy of this World War III. And this coup by corruption, and I should stipulate, I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I've never voted Republican in my life. I neither vote Democrat or Republican. This, to me, people paint me as some, oh, it's just the Trump fanaticism or something. This is just about the truth. This is coming through. You are the Normandy, and your clerk, Stephanie Scott, is one of those brave Americans who said, not through me, not on my watch. This can only happen. This corruption ultimately can only win if they can intimidate or buy off the Stephanie Scotts of the world. At the end of the day, that's the last impediment to them winning. And here, what Stephanie Lambert has discovered is at the investigative front end of this whole movement. And what she has discovered in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Georgia, she was telling about the Tennessee error. She buried the lead. The Tennessee error, those machines she was talking about in Tennessee, the government, the EAC, the testing laboratories, and Dominion signed off on their final statement of the problem is that there's erroneous code in the machine, but we couldn't find it. But don't worry, we've made a patch. Well, there's no such thing, and that's a root cause analysis. Well, if you work in the tech industry, you understand that's not really a root cause analysis. That's I could not find a root cause analysis. There's no such thing with a computer of saying, well, there's some erroneous code in the machine, we're admitting that, but we couldn't find it. But what that means is what really happened is they found one of the hacks, but Dominion can't admit it. Well, your clerk, and it's so horrendous what your Secretary of State did, sending this letter out for everyone to erase their stuff. That was an unlawful order. That was absolutely unlawful. That's a serious federal felony. Every file you erase is its own felony. That was a serious felony, and she knew it. And I bet 2/3 of the people or more, 90% of the people in Stephanie Scott's position accepted an unlawful order. She had every right to do what she was doing. She had every right to do what you were doing. And what you're saying.
Thank you. I just wanted to add on the Tennessee error, the Georgia error, the Fulton County problems, that all of these problems stemmed with someone like Stephanie Scott carefully paying attention to what their job was and pausing and insisting that it be investigated and look into it. So that's exactly what Stephanie Adams has done for Adams Township here. She's insisted that we look into the qualified voter roll problems in the state of Michigan, the EPB data that shows a problem at the state level, and she's insisting that these things get fixed and that she preserve the data on behalf of Adams Township, that she not commit any crimes at the direction of the Secretary of State, and that's what she's going to continue to do moving forward. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Stephanie's going to answer each and every question that you submit to her in writing so that she can provide transparency to Adams Township. She's in the process of setting up a website that all of this data, all of these emails, all of these reports will be available for you to read and learn about and use in your own community if you're not from Adams Township. Thank you.